What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
John, good to see you. Ron, good to see you as well. Episode 425 here, live in the flesh. Well, at least not in the flesh, but sort of. If you're following the YouTube option, you can see some of our flesh.
Mm-hmm.
That which we deem appropriate.
Right. Or I would even say, Steve, that which is deemed appropriate by society.
By society, by those that oversee, YouTube and things of that nature.
Yes.
Basically, we have shirts on, is what we're trying to say. If we just try to, I didn't want to hoodwink you into coming to YouTube and think that there was more than just a face. But
yeah, like you're going to see some C and B.
Yeah.
In the fashion of the time, though, we're buying these shirts in the store and then we're cropping them so that they're just below the line.
Just below the nips.
Right on 80s time. Just like, I saw you and her walking in the rain.
Ooh.
Sorry.
So yeah, episode 425. We're going to go through my choice in a moment for required viewing, which was the new documentary called The Speedway Murders. And then we're going to talk, I think all three of us have seen Cuckoo, which is still in some theaters. I don't know, is that coming to digital soon? I actually didn't pick that up. I know it's still in theaters where we are, where we record in that general area. And then I think, John, you saw Strange Darling, so we'll listen to a little bit of your feelings about that towards the end of the show. And then, whatever else we want to mention before we wrap up, but that'll make it a show. So you guys want to jump right into required viewing? Anything else news-wise that you wanted to mention? Or
Ronald, didn't you have some physical media you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yeah. So for my birthday, I got myself some physical media. One thing that's really cool is Arrow Video has a 50% off sale at Barnes & Noble, also on Amazon. So I picked up something I've been waiting so long to pick up because it was so expensive. It was $50. That is the original Dune.
Oh, nice.
Ooh.
I cannot wait to watch this.
The David Lynch version.
Yeah, David Lynch version. Store has a theatrical version and director's cut. It's supposed to be a really good restoration, so I'm really excited about that. Also, I got a European Arrow Video release, Battle Royale. You wanna think Hunger Games. Hunger Games stole this whole movie's flow. Go. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say. Also, I would say when that movie came out, there was a lot of that was right when the reality boom was kind of starting. And I wonder if I'm getting the guy's name right. Robert Sheckley, I believe, wrote books that were predate any of that have a similar idea of hit people who are engaged in a worldwide tournament to be the last hitman standing kind of thing, or last assassin standing. So, I mean, that idea has been kicked around for a while, but I remember when Battle Royale came out, people were saying this is a little bit it was reminiscent of the Robert Sheckley books. And then when Hunger Games came out, people were saying this is reminiscent of Battle Royale. But I especially remember it was when Survivor was at its height and it was new. People were talking about Battle Royale as kind of the movie that had that kind of feel to it because it is sort of it's a televised murder spree, right?
Yeah, it's a televised murder spree. Everybody has collars on their necks, and then they have timed sections on the island. So if you're at that section and you have your collar on, your head could explode just for being in that section.
That's a bad scene.
It's a bad scene. So people are guaranteed to die on top of you having to kill people around you. So it's pretty intense. Next up, Crawl. I've never seen this movie in my life. I hear it's really good.
It's fun.
I'm gonna check it out. Yeah.
There's a Crawl 2 coming too, right?
Yeah, there's a sequel coming out. Yeah.
Oh, cool. The next one is Akira. This has always been around $50. It dropped down to $17.99. Amazon's thinking about me on my birthday. But then the one that I've been waiting for so long, months, I pre-ordered this movie and it came.
Nice.
That's my shitty night call.
Did we say all of these things out loud for the pure audio listeners?
Yeah.
That last one was the Drive.
Oh, Drive. I didn't say that one. Yeah. Drive. 4K restoration. Sony.
You know what? I really, let's be honest. If they don't know that movie from Ronald's song he just sang,
they don't know from.
They don't need to know it.
Well, they know from the Olympics now. It was even crazy. Like Night Call got a refresh after the Olympics, which is really cool. So this is a Sony restoration, brand new Atmos track. Man, this thing sounds like it's booming. It is booming. It's a really cool. Listen, it's no Baby Driver. I know it's like a weird thing to say, but Baby Driver for some reason is like the
doesn't have a problematic actor like Kevin Spacey in it. You mean?
Yeah, that's true. Man, I didn't think about that.
Being good. That's what sucks, is that Kevin Spacey is really good in being good.
And they had to just sell his waterfront property in Baltimore. You remember?
That poor guy.
Had to, man. He's like, oh, look, I'm broke, man. You got to sell my property. You got to.
Well, no, the story for a while there was like he won't leave.
All
like
right.
He won't move out. Right. Like he had I
didn't even know that rich people could do that. Like, I didn't know that, like, you
act
could
crazy and say I won't leave.
Yeah. I thought that only poor tenants could do that.
I thought that like kings and shit did that, you know?
And
like mafiosos, you know, dig in. Well, I'll throw some physical media on, or just one bit, because I think that it's valid to say this. This is a book. Remember these? These are often the basis of the things that we talk about on this show.
How do you say it? Book?
But I have read the second. I've loved the show Slow Horses on Apple TV Plus. It's now going into its fourth season, which is based roughly on the fourth book. What I did was I watched the first season, then read the second book in time for the second season, which was kind of based on that book, and then did that with the third season. And then I decided I'm going to go back and read the first book, which is the one that kind of started it all. So Mick Herron's books, if you're at all, I don't even think of myself as a person that reads a lot of like spy fiction, that kind of formulaic genre fiction, which can be fun. You know, it's just not a genre that I'm into. But Mick Herron's style is just fantastic. I feel like if you pick up one of his books, you'll know within a few chapters, like if it's got its hooks in you, it's just really funny, really great character stuff, really kind of cool. The concept of the show is all there about like mid-level, low-level, bungling kind of spies that have failed to the point where they've been sent to this outpost where you only send the worst people. And the premise is the guy who runs it, Gary Oldman's character, is that he basically wants to treat you so poorly that you quit. You know, like that's kind of the way you get out of the force. But the question as to why he was bumped down to that position and all the swirling around them of the people higher up who kind of use them at times, it's just a really fun world. And I think this book is the one that kind of set it up. I can confirm the second and the third book are great. So I'm expecting this to be good too. Cool. So we just got physical.
I want to mention one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Uh-oh.
So I've been into audiobooks, and I decided for some reason I wanted to have my own collection, like a Plex almost. Like I have my own audio collection. I found out that a group of people enhanced the Stephen Fry Harry Potter books. So like there's like the books narrated by him, and then they add like the soundtrack, sound effects. Even some audio clips from the movie, like you know, bigger parts. So, just the Stephen Fry, just narrating the book in general is just incredible. And it's strange because it was before the movie came out, and it's very apparent that maybe the actors listened to this audio book and were like, "Hey, we'll use some of these ideas for these voices." It's so similar that it's crazy. And this is way before the movies came out, which is
it's weird. When I listened to those books, it was audiobooks by a guy named Jim Dale.
Yes, people talk about that one.
Who did all the voices too? But what my friends and I used to joke about when Jim Dale ran out of voices, there were certain characters that just talked a certain way that was like, this is a Jim Dale voice when he's out of voices. Just someone who talks like this, Harry. You know, but no, I thought he was really good. But I guess those were the American audio. I mean, I think there were different versions of the audiobooks in different countries. So anyway, that's interesting that someone's taken them. And is it like an unofficial version that they've enhanced it, or is it?
It's super unofficial.
Oh, that's cool.
And then
because no money goes to J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, no. And then they just announced that they're gonna have a celebrity one that's coming out pretty soon. Where I guess to prepare for the HBO Max one, which is gonna be a season of book, which sounds really cool. They're just gonna get a cast of celebrities that are gonna read the characters. Which sounds like that's gonna be really fun. So I'm looking forward to that.
Nice.
Right, so we went physical, and then we got bootleg.
Yeah,
Steve, you got anything either bootleg or physical that you've enjoyed?
I don't think so. No, no
Right.
bootlegs or physical media for me.
let's get bootleg.
Let's get bootlegged. Bootlegged. You could say booty legged. That sounds different.
Yeah.
That's a different song. It feels like it should be in a playlist with fat bottom girls.
Right. Put it on my leg.
Put it on my leg. Well, all right.
If
Sure.
we must. If we must.
There should be another genre of like R&B club bangers called confused R&B. Socially awkward R&B.
You love to see it.
awkward.
You love to see it.
I would love to listen to that.
Steve, you want to take us into required viewing?
Yeah. Let's go into required viewing. So yeah, my pick once again was the new documentary that is out on digital for rental or purchase. It's called The Speedway Murders. The true crime of it all. I remember, God, it had to be like 4 or 5 years ago. The Big Podcast, My Favorite Murder. They did an episode on it, which was, I think, the first time I'd ever heard about it or, kind of became aware of this unsolved case from the late 70s. But yeah, and I saw one of the critics that I like and follow on Twitter, really trust, he'd been talking about how he saw it, maybe at a festival screening or somehow I'd seen it a little while ago. And I'd just been waiting for it to come out, and timing was good. It came out recently and thought it would be fun to do another, true crime doc. I picked one a few choices ago and just went for another one. I just gotta, I don't get the time to watch these like I used to. So when I say, hey, it's for the podcast, I get that little window to watch it.
No, often if Nikki comes in and sees me watching something that seems to her pointless, she'll say, but she always gets it wrong. She'll say, is this viewing on demand or whatever? But it's like, sometimes I'm like, yeah. No, it's just some garbage I'm watching because I want to watch it.
Right.
But no, it's a good, I think in general, it's been a good dose of something different just about every week that I have to look for and watch. But yeah, this was something that had not even crossed my radar, but I do think I had heard I remembered the Burger Chef murders or had hearing about that at some point. And I know what you mean, Steve. Like, those things will kind of cycle through a podcast world of like, oh, this show does their version of it and this show does their version of it. So you kind of pick your flavor of what type of podcast. I haven't even listened to, I used to listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I stopped for a while there. But this is the kind of case that I could see being an interesting one because there is a lot to sort of puzzle out about it. The unsolved nature of it always makes you wonder if it's going to be a satisfying case to find out about at all. That's why sometimes Unsolved Mysteries, which the new Netflix version of it is pretty well made, but sometimes I'll be watching it and I'll forget, like, wait a minute, there's not going to be any satisfaction. The whole premise of this is that there's not going to be any satisfaction. It's called Unsatisfying Mystery Stories. Well, yeah, I know, Ronald, you sent a text to the group about this. You said this doc is hard to watch. And I was wondering about, I watched it and I thought of several reasons how you may have meant that, or several ways you may have meant that.
Well,
so I was wondering what inspired you to say that.
Murder docs kind of, they weigh heavy on me, man. I don't know. It's like, it's one of the, I could watch
You're
a
not
million.
cold and callous like me and Steve.
I could watch a million horror films, but there's something about like, okay, here's what it is. I don't like when you play with real people's lives. I'm not a big fan of that, where you trivialize it in a way. But I do understand why people like them so much, because they're so there has to be some knowledge in the world about these things happening, because you got to know that there's an evil like this that exists in the world, right? Yeah. Now, this was done in a perspective that I had never seen in my life. I'd never seen reenactments and then the characters talking to each other about the event as if they were alive when the trial was going on. I swear I'd never seen anything like that before. It fucked me up, to be completely honest with you. That's what was making me sad. It was like, it made me super sad. Like, it was like, well,
it's like their ghosts are trying to solve the crime.
Yes, they're like, when they found our bodies, they said, I'm like, come on, man, like, this is a human. This is like a real human that exists and had ambitions and didn't think they were going to die that night. I think that's one of the bigger things. But
I think the thing that go ahead.
I think the reason why we don't know about this documentary is it's an American tale, but it's an Australian company that did it. So like if you look at all the production, it has like the city of Australia, so done by this, and it's like a bunch of. So I don't know how accessible this was to us before. I guess it went to Peabody. So I literally hadn't heard about this at all. I mean, and typically I'll at least hear about some of the murder docs, especially ones that have such a high production value. But yeah, I gotta tell you, that part was so sad to me, hearing those kids kind of go back and forth about their lives. But man, the perspectives in it were really interesting. Like, hearing the cops and there are a lot of like dodgy characters. I think more dodgy characters in this murder doc than I've ever seen.
Right. Didn't it kind of seem like it was like Crime Town or something like that?
Yes.
That this took place, and like everybody who was part of the witnessing or the fabric of the group around the story that had stories to tell, everybody had some connection to like criminals or people who were supposedly doing crimes or a knowledge of something. And it was kind of intriguing in that way.
But they presented it like it was like this innocent town, but there were like bombings going on. They're like, they bombed the place several times. I'm like, what? And the people are getting, and then somebody got murdered the summer before that. I'm like, I feel like they don't understand what a quiet town is. Like, that's not a quiet town at all. But that made it even more interesting. The fact that so much stuff had hit this one town, and they say it's related to the race car scene. But I don't know if it sounds like it existed way before that.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like that was just a contributing factor.
It's just like Deadwood or something,
Right?
It's like there's just a lot going on here. And
Right.
Speedway's the name of the town, right? But it's also near a speedway. It's in Speedway, Indiana. So, yeah, I thought it was interesting. I have to say, I don't know if I felt like that device of cutting to the actors playing the dead kids always worked for me. There were some times where I was like, is this like immensely respectful or is this weirdly tasteless? I couldn't decide at times. I thought though the way that it was incorporated was it comes up, and this movie hits it maybe almost in a ham-fisted way. It really hits it hard, but it's like something that you're gonna have to address if you do one of these things now, which is like, to what extent are you talking about the victims and the loss of the victims, and to what extent are you kind of mythologizing about the killers, or what the reason for the killing might have been, or what the ugly details of the killing might have been. And I think having the kids there, like you said, Steve, almost like a team of ghosts. Like this almost feels like it could have been a Netflix series. And in fact, isn't there a Netflix series about
dead? Was it something dead something detectives?
But it's like Dead Boy Detectives or something.
Dead Boy Detectives. That's it. Yeah.
Right. The idea of like ghosts trying to figure out their own murder, but also in the age of now we're on the other side of this true crime boom, and we're on the other side of this amateur sleuth boom. So now people have always been solving murder mysteries in movies and TV shows, but now we have this angle of we've seen podcasters, you know what I mean? There's just this angle of it's part of society. So I don't know. I thought it was an interesting approach in that respect, and I think there were times where it was kind of poignant, like you said, Ronald, like as kind of cheesy as it was, the way the movie ends with them leaving the building and going about the way they should have gone, that night. That can't help but tug at your heartstrings, and that was more effective because you've seen the kids, the actors play the kids. And I also thought it was effective when it came to the part where it's like things are being said about people in a documentary that are like, well, they're not here to defend themselves or explain themselves. And I thought whenever that would come up, I was like, oh, that's interesting to picture. Like, how would the person feel about how they're depicted? That this is the story that's known of them, But again, I feel like sometimes it felt like a high school play or something where that which is like painfully earnest and sincere, but also maybe a little kind of corny or something. But it's an interesting case, and I think that there is something kind of creepy about the circumstances around it. The fact that there's this mysterious van and this guy who it really seems like they sort of know who the guy was, but there's just no evidence against him. At least that's what I took from it at the end, because the footage they showed of the guy walking in looking suspicious, and the picture they had of the guy and the guy who was like, I'm sure it was him. I don't know, that was pretty convincing to me. But I don't know, Steve, both as a true crime story and as a piece of a film. How did this strike you?
I mean, honestly, I really enjoyed the documentary. I mean, I think the device really worked for me. I also felt like the way it kind of frames the confusion around the case entirely worked. That's what worked so well with me, with the kids kind of telling the different, like when it would flash back and rewind to the phone call that the one kid made to his parents so that he could stay late, and then go right back into the same scene, and it's like the something conundrum, or like it's like the different theories that they throw up on the screen as to what it could have been. I think the way that they're so confused as they step through the narrative built around those theories is what kind of struck me. Like the fact that if you read about this or you listen to a podcast like I had before about them just kind of talking about the facts, it's one thing. But I feel like the idea or the take to say, yeah, we're going to do these reenactments where they're going to we're going to have these interviews that frame the theory and kind of substantiate it or why they believe it's this way. But even in the moment with these kids, the actors portraying these children or these kids that were murdered, like that really got to me. I think like the emotional element of like, it's kind of like a catchy way of saying, let's tell the story this way. But it also was an emotional choice because I found myself reacting so confused and frustrated, trying to parse all these ideas around something that was like so grossly mishandled from the start, and to hear detectives say like, we ruined it from the beginning. Like that's not something you always hear in a true crime podcast or doc or series, like somebody actually taking ownership and accountability for the fact that like it was completely mishandled. Something like in this specific case being seen as a robbery and like sending people home to come back and open the store the next day only to find bodies 2 days later. That blew my mind. When I heard it on the podcast and when I saw it over and over again in this doc, that really kind of affected me, and I felt like the way they kind of went through these ideas and like how disorienting it was. It's really hard to really think or believe that they'll ever solve this case because of how disorienting all the facts are, the stories, all the substantiated evidence or unsubstantiated. Like it's so disorienting, and it's kind of so upsetting. And that element of using the actors in those reenactments, like it really initially I felt like wow, this is kind of slick, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. But then as it went through all the scenarios and really focused in on like, there would be like lines where like, well, I thought it was like you guys were like, I thought it was a blue van or a yellow van or an orange van. It's like to run through all this information that's been collected in the past 40 plus years, and there's still so much confusion. It's infuriating. Like I can't like the families of these kids. Like I just, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
And also like, I respect authority, you know what I mean? Like I think cops are whatever, but I think you realize, especially, I've had kind of weird stuff happen with doctors. You realize that people are just doing their jobs. And if you understand that part of it, people wouldn't be so beholden to this idea that like cops are doing a good job just off the bat. That's not necessarily true. People come in with attitudes, preconceived notions. Just because you're in a quiet place doesn't mean that a crime can't happen. Doesn't mean you don't deal with things thoroughly. And you hear these things and you're like, man, this could be me. This could be somebody in my family. This could be a friend. That level of neglect is just, and I think that's part of it too. That was most of my frustration. The murders were terrible, right? But the neglect, and I'm like, these are like mostly white kids. They're like, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, not to make it a race thing, but it is a thing. Sure. Things are handled differently depending on who you are sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And the fact that they did this to these kids, they get like everyone deserves a fair chance is all I'm saying. Space to, they could have been found, if they would have followed the protocol, if they would have listened to the lady that saw the people. Also, man, the victim layman in the end made me punch air. That guy that was just like, they should have minded their business.
Right.
The fuck out of here, man. if I'm looking this way and I see a crime happening, I'm not gonna be like, oh no, I mean, in the curtains up or something. It's what do you? I don't know. That's just like that's a rough take, but you know, it is what it is. And I think when I think about it, although it's hard for me to watch, and I think yeah, maybe it should be challenging. I really did overall think it was a earnest attempt to kind of figure this whole thing out and give a bunch of perspectives. You know, it's like they clearly wanted some of these theories to fall off. And the assumptions that people make sometimes, they're just like, this person dealt weed, so they killed somebody.
Right. Or even these guys were robbing other burger chefs, places. And so they must have done this totally different thing in this case. Like, I don't know. I mean, again, you can see, the bungling of it, and the particularly the detail you mentioned, Steve, the cleaning the crime scene, or at least the beginning of
and then restaging it. Like, that blows my mind.
Making a fake crime scene, essentially.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, and it's like those situations where, like, they're doing, like, your comment about doing their job. But I mean, it's a spectrum in terms of, like, the attention to the detail, to the assumption of positive intent, to, benefit of the doubt. Like, I just feel like, it's a clean, or it's a clear assumption. The things like John was mentioning, like, there's been robberies happening, like all these other precedents in their mind, that things very easily, and still to this day, in varying range of scenarios, get dismissed, for many, many reasons. And unfortunately, it's a situation where something was dismissed, and just completely blew back. And it's now, again, podcasts, there's books written about this. There's now a documentary. Like, this is something that, people are really trying, like these filmmakers I was reading, like, spent 6 years researching this, and kind of doing due diligence on this, so, I don't know. It's wild. It's funny you mentioned the Australian thing, because I was reading about one of the production companies, Umbrella.
Yeah.
Like, they're an Australian production company that do a lot of, they take they do a lot of global distribution. They find partners to distribute it globally, obviously. Yeah. But I was reading an article saying that this year they had two films on their slate that were based on American true stories, which was this and Late Night with the Devil.
I knew they did. I had a feeling.
The same production company.
Yes, man.
Yeah. But so obviously some interesting shit that goes down in America.
Yeah. I may get it. I may get the Blu-ray. I may wind up getting it. Like, it was pretty intriguing, man. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I started off feeling a little weird about it, and then in the end, I'm just like, this was done well. Like, I'd never seen a perspective like that before. So
yeah, cool. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if that sounds interesting, if you didn't watch along with us, we were talking about it. Again, it's on all the standard, Amazon, Apple, all the standard digital release platforms if you want to rent it, or and some of them you can purchase it as well. But it's only like, I think was it Amazon or Apple? It was like $3.99 to rent it. So yeah,
I do think leaning into the reenactments and that aspect is like, some documentaries do some reenactment stuff, but it almost fudges, like this doesn't ever pretend that they're showing you something real. It's definitely going into that realm. I usually use Errol Morris as the Thin Blue Line as the is that what it's called? The Thin Blue Line?
The Thin Blue Line.
Yeah. And Thin Red Line is the
war movie.
Is that the name of that? The Thin Red Line? It's just the Thin Blue Line? Okay, there's different colored lines. I wonder if, there's a thin turquoise line somewhere. But the Thin Blue Line is one where it got criticized / celebrated for the way that it used reenactments to sort of color your perception of what version of the story you were seeing and what was true. And I think documentaries that lean into that and sort of say, yeah, we're using reenactments, but we're playing into it. We're going to say that the subject of how we're coloring the truth is part of this documentary. It's not just the story that's being told, but it's about how we tell these stories. And I think this one, that's a very personalized approach to doing that same thing. But I feel like there were some really atmospheric scenes and some really creepy images of just the way that like the nighttime scenes were shot around the place. So even if outside of the regular reenactments, I think this doc does have some atmosphere. Yeah, I mean, I'll agree that on a technical level, I think it was reasonably well done and thoughtfully made, even if the structure of it didn't necessarily work for me. I think true crime folks will probably be interested to see this, even to find out for themselves if it's going to work for them or not. So
cool.
Well, I guess I'm the one who is now requiring you to watch something. So we're coming up in not our next episode, but our next episode. We are wrapping up the Halloween Watch-'em-all with the David Gordon Green trilogy of Halloween films, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, which are all sort of big Jamie Lee Curtis starrers. And so I got to thinking, and I remember I'd suggested maybe we would all do a Jamie Lee Curtis pick in this little interim between those two series, or those two watch-em-alls. So I imagine that, Ronald, you picked Terror Train in this cycle. And then, Steve, you picked Perfect, the film where she plays an aerobics instructor opposite John Travolta.
John Travolta.
In sort of a erotic thriller. And so I was like, well, I got to pick something different from either a slasher film or an erotic thriller. So I thought about another time where Jamie Lee Curtis has been part of a classic film that then tried to follow things up with another film that may not be as well regarded. But honestly, I have not seen this film since it came out back in 1997. It is the Fish Called Wanda follow-up, Fierce Creatures.
Oh, yeah.
So this stars John Cleese, Jamie Lee Curtis, Kevin Kline, and Michael Palin, just like A Fish Called Wanda did. And it's basically as much of the same creative team from that classic as they could bring in, but it's a totally different story, totally different characters. So I thought, why don't we check out another Jamie Lee attempt to follow up a classic, Fierce Creatures from 1997. As I recall, at the time, it seemed disappointing, but I'm thinking now, was it just disappointing compared to A Fish Called Wanda? Or was it just a different tone? Or at that point in my life, was I not in the mood for such a silly movie? Because I think it's an extremely, extremely silly movie. And being a British comedy from 1997, there's a chance that there will be some stereotypes and slurs. And
pretty good.
I have no idea what to expect from this movie. I don't remember it being that type of movie. But 97 was peak, like, political correctness, and then like, well, let's not be politically correct. So we'll have to see what John Cleese was up to. And, he's another guy who's opened his mouth about some stupid shit in recent years. So we'll see if we can look back and find him funny. He's one of those guys who is so funny at being a pompous ass. And then you find out maybe that's, not just something he does for a paycheck. That's just sort of something he does for free. But yeah, Fierce Creatures from 1997. Cool. I think it's out there to be rented. And, it's a slim, 89 minutes, something like that. Yeah. Even if it's terrible, it'll go down like terrible. What goes down easy?
Cough syrup. I've had a lot of that.
Does cough syrup go down? I was trying to think of anything that goes down easy. I was going to say wine, but
water?
I guess for some people wine doesn't go down easy. Yeah, but that's the blandest thing. It'll go down like a nice glass of water, even if it's terrible water.
Warm, hot water. It still goes down.
Warm, hot, infected water.
All right.
Contaminated, not infected.
Contaminated
water
water
can be infected. Yeah.
What's next?
Cuckoo.
Part of the Danaissance. Dan Stevens.
Yeah, man.
Rolling into town to once again devour the scenery in a film.
Yes.
Love me some Dan Stevens.
Well, I think you were the first of us to watch this, Steve. And I think I would have watched this eventually, no matter what. But when you mentioned it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I will watch it for the show. Because I had been trying to catch it, but I wasn't sure if we would do a segment or anything. But maybe start us off. What did you think? I think you're kind of coming at it similarly to me as like a horror fan. What were your expectations?
I liked it. I mean, in general, I really like Hunter Schafer. Just everything they've done on Euphoria. I wish there was more of them out there, things to watch. But yeah, this was one that definitely was, kind of promoted heavily and talked a lot about coming out of a couple of the festivals, maybe out of South by Southwest. I can't recall which one. But this was one of the neon releases. This along with Longlegs were the two big things to keep an eye out for this summer, horror wise, from the festivals. And I thought it was really good. I think the It does. It does. Let me think here. I don't want to spoil anything. It does. Some interesting things in the third act, like in terms of where I thought the show or the movie might have been going, or how far it would go with when you realize what's happening, or when you're kind of basically confirming when they confirm what's happening. That I thought would go a little further because it did feel like a movie that was like gonna go there more than maybe some horror films do, especially ones that get tagged as like slow burns or ones that don't have a payoff of any kind. There's definitely some payoffs in this movie, that's for sure. Like, so you can have that to look forward to it in the end. But I like the idea around the film. I like the idea of this family, kind of going to this remote resort to kind of get help for one of the kids of the family. As you learn more and more about that kid's, how she's conceived and when and where and how, and those puzzle pieces start to fit together, and I think that's the part I like the most about the movie. But yeah,
the sort of conspiracy effect of like what's been going on and how much. Even now, as you're saying that, I'm realizing I don't know that I've really sat down and parsed exactly what all was planned and predestined and what was sort of a happenstance of her being there. But now that you're mentioning it, it seems like, even the premise of this getting her there in the first place is a very orchestrated
for sure
set of circumstances.
Which, I dig. It's got some great visuals. I mean, the one that was I don't know if it was in the trailer, but there's the one shot of her on the bike, when my God, that creature, like, that's what you call nightmare fuel. Like that scene. I almost wish I for sure wish I hadn't seen it or heard about it. But even in the context of seeing the film, that one right there, like, is worth the price just to watch that scene. It's great.
It's almost shot like that Children of Men scene with the car driving in that like scene shot. The way that it spirals around, like you see the person go that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, so there's a person going that way, and then you see them like parallel to the bike.
Like you see them like past her in the distance. Yeah, it's like and then they're behind her.
Coming at an angle, and then the way the shadow lurches forward based on as you're passing a light.
Oh God.
And so it kind of moves away and then comes back, but each time it comes back, it's closer. And then she's got earbuds on, so she doesn't know. I don't know. Yeah, everything about that was perfectly executed. And I remember it from the trailer, and then I remember when I was watching the movie and she hopped on the bike, and I thought it was pretty early in the movie for that to be happening.
It was.
I was like, oh shit, is this that scene? I mean, I got excited because the scene in the trailer was so great. I mean, it reminds me of ideas I've had about how to pull off little horror scenes and like things I've seen that have really worked, which are, maybe not like a one shot the way you're talking about in Children of Men, Ronald, but that kind of orchestrated camera move where you're following a character and there's motion to it, and we do get a sense of the geography of where it looks like a woman, but we're already suspecting that it's not just a regular woman. It's some kind of creature or some kind of someone under a spell or something we don't know at that point, really. Yeah. But it's a disturbing idea that thing's going to catch up to our character, and it seems, like I said, early in the film for us to be dealing with something like that. That scene also reminded me of the kid on the bike and In the Mouth of Madness. Whenever they try to leave town, there's like in the dark road going in and out of town. Yeah. There's like this kid on a bike that they keep passing, and sometimes he has like the head of an old man or whatever. That was similar to this for me, where it was just like, it's that night road, and you're seeing something out there with you. But no, I thought the sort of conspiracy nature of it, I guess I liked that stuff too. I also just liked the setting. I liked the sort of look and feel of her like working at the desk in the hotel and the sort of gift shop, and like having to learn the ropes and all that. It all felt so dreamlike, and like she's being put in this position by circumstance that's very unusual. And then there's the stuff that happens randomly, and then there's the stuff that's like, like I said, people have plans for her, kind of. That, I don't know, I thought it was an interesting combination. It wasn't like one of those where the conspiracy is just realizing, everybody's in on it. It was more like, there's backstory here. And then you sometimes forget when there's a cold open like that you haven't connected back to it, And then when you do connect back to it, there's this feeling of, okay, there is a little bit of mythology built into this story that, the people in the story are dealing with the past in a way that is interesting, I thought, as it rolled along. And I think especially the relationship between like her father and and Dan Stevens' character, it took me a long time to kind of figure out like what's really going on here. And I still am, again, trying to put together like how much does her dad know and how much is he just a sort of a pawn in this situation. But Ronald, how did it strike you? And what were your circumstances of getting out to see it?
I saw it before I got sick.
Okay.
And I was pretty excited just because of I don't know. What I'm going to say sounds like an insult, but it looked inexpensive in a good way. Like it looked like all of the things that we were watching is acting and it being shot well. And that's what I like. Don't throw $30 million at something if you can make like a, $15 million thing look spectacular. Like this movie looked so good. The camera work was so good. There was a lot of like playing with space that I liked.
Yeah.
And just having her as the lead and sifting through all this stuff, that's troubled really well. It's just like, just like this troubled case of a person, just trying to figure out, what she's going to do in these circumstances. And how many languages do they speak? Like, it was that French and German? And I feel like I heard something else. But I liked that there was so much going on. Like, it felt very much the way it feels when you go to like a place out of the country where it's kind of an intersection of a bunch of people. And, everybody's on their own sort of path, speaking their own language and doing their own thing. And it just felt very spooky. Like it's strange how even just her being in a room by herself felt scary. When the lights, it was daytime. It's just like, why does this feel so scary? It's like close shots of the characters and people seeming loyal that weren't loyal. And I like that. I like the kind of play on relationships. So overall, it just got really confusing in the end. That's the only thing I'll say. It got really confusing in the end. I couldn't, like, I was trying to sift through it. I'm like, am I imagine? But I think some of it is like obviously sanity being played on and stuff like that. But man, what the hell was going on in the end? I don't really know. But it's worth a rewatch because of it.
Yeah, I think it's like it kind of becomes a thing where I think that's kind of what I was trying to, without saying anything that would spoil it, like kind of where the third act goes. I kind of was expecting to go a little more of in a linear, at least at that point when it's kind of pretty much revealed what's happening. And I guess more of a linear kind of conclusion. And it kind of
when you say that, do you mean like a linear sort of like what happened was more like went into a direction that you weren't picturing, and therefore it kind of felt, because I do feel like the storyline progressed in a sort of like, it's not like the timeline is fractured, but I do think when you get to the end, what it deals with most explicitly is maybe not what you're like, the mysteries that you're involved with throughout. It becomes much more of just an escape the situation kind of story, much less about like untangling the mystery. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that what it was? Because that's the only thing I would say. I think that last act is good, but I do feel like I have a lot of questions that are supposed to linger, obviously. But I was kind of thinking that we would get more of that. But
well, I think for the most part, for a movie that feels like it's kind of going for it a lot through the first and second act, like kind of showing a lot of stuff. When it gets to that scene, like basically that scene in the pool, in the emptied pool, with the bed in the pool. Again, just not to say too much, but when it gets to that scene, I felt like it kind of zigzagged a little bit. Like it kind of, and I think that confuses. It's a little confusing, and maybe that's where Ronald's kind of getting at, because even the person, like I felt like who I saw it with was a little confused at that part, and because like a lot of characters come into that scene very quickly, that like kind of were being kept apart because they're kind of filling in spaces of a story that we're supposed to know and not know. And I think that kind of just kind of, kind of that kind of crescendoed very quickly in that scene. And then it becomes the escape story, and I think, I don't know, I guess I thought once that was a full out reveal there was going to be more of what was like more commitment to that, like to what was happening up to that moment with like what they've been doing over generations they reference and things like that. I thought I would focus more on that stuff and why and how and others and things like that. And maybe that's just my curiosity. Maybe that's success in making me more curious about, you know, what this creature or this species is, and why, you know, there's motivation around them. But I just felt like once that hits, it just becomes a, you know, she's trying to escape, but are we supposed to be rooting for other characters that we've met earlier that are kind of helping her, but not helping her?
I think not.
You know?
I think that's the point where we see that other characters are more obsessed with like eliminating the everyone involved, you know, which includes eliminating somebody that she cares about.
Right.
And so at that moment it becomes, I mean, I think it's kind of cool the way it shakes out where it becomes about like the two sort of megalomaniacal or psychotic men, monomaniacal men who are fixated on a thing are the ones who are battling it out, and they get to almost like it's like, okay, we can slip out. They've got their shit that's really more about each other than it is about us, than it is about the thing that's happening here. But I don't know. I thought that scene was really cleverly orchestrated with the sort of standoff.
They'll destroy themselves.
Yeah, and the way that the little girl, I think Alma is her name, I think the way that she manifests in the end, there's a cool thing that she does that I thought was a neat, I don't know, just a neat conclusion to all of that. But I think the character that you're speaking of is a character who I do like in the film, and I was sort of disappointed, not in the movie, but in the character. I was like, oh, I'm sad that he's going down this all about the mission way rather than kind of adapting to what you're talking about, which is kind of the emotional story of what's going on with the, you know, the family and the sisters, like the notion of almost like a rescue mission as opposed to just going in to destroy everything. But I thought it was interesting the way that he and Dan, I don't know, there is a cool that matchup was an interesting. Their motivations and why they're fixated on each other, I thought was kind of interesting and satisfying. And I also thought just the visuals, you talked about the kind of look of the film, Ronald. I do think it's made like a really cool indie film or a really cool low budget film. You know, they make use of, I think it's six or 7 million. They make use of it, but a lot of it is locations. A lot of it is finding the right, you know, if it's like a lodge or a resort, once you find the right setting for it, that's half your work right there. But that notion that it's not like uncivilized or like something from the past, but it does feel like a little bit of a removal from the world we know. So it's got a fable kind of quality mixed in with this kind of not quite body horror, but there is a sort of psychological transformation horror going on, and she keeps getting these injuries and that are, you know, she spends more than half the movie with like bleeding bandages and stuff like that. So I think that, yeah, Hunter Schafer, I didn't have much of a reference point for that actor before this movie, but I was really impressed by the sort of off-kilter energy she brought to it, or they brought to it. It didn't it's like it wasn't overly quirky or mannered, but it did have a little bit of that you know, indie film kind of, as though she was a character who walked in from a Wes Anderson movie or something like that, but she stepped into a much darker world. But yeah, I really liked it too, and it's unusual and it doesn't get boring. I mean, it kind of reminds me of what I said about what was the other recent horror film that I basically said has payoffs in it, that's like elevated but still good. Well, whatever it was, I said that, and I think I think it's true of this movie as well, that it does have the feel of a you know, it's the neon A24 kind of feel of an elevated horror film. I say that in quotes. I don't really like that term too much, but I do like when movies have that feel you're talking about, Ronald, of being like a cool indie movie that has horror elements and then dips into that. This has that, and yet stuff happens, and you know, it's not like you're waiting forever for stuff to turn spooky. It just has a mood. It almost has a David Lynchy kind of feeling of unusualness to it, you know, that is just you're stepping into a weird atmosphere where characters are being a little unnatural, but they're still relatable human things going on.
Did we ever talk about Longlegs?
Not since you saw it.
Okay, I saw it. I saw it. I mean, I just want to say that it was crazy. It was one of the craziest movies. I don't know.
Well, it too is unusual like that. Like it's there's a rash of these interest. This has been a good year for offbeat horror that like actually delivers.
Neon's cooking, man. Neon's cooking over there. I do. Something about this movie feels like it'll forever be in my life. I can't figure out why it is.
About Longlegs?
Yeah.
By the way, it was Oddity that I said that about, I believe.
Oh.
It has the feel of elevated horror, but it actually delivers like a shock every 15 minutes or something like that.
I'll check out Oddity.
Yeah, I want to watch that. I know what you mean about Longlegs, though. Like, I really do. I feel like, I mean, the more it sits with me, like, I really do feel like I love that one.
Yeah.
And, like, it does feel like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just the Michael Monroe of it all, but I feel like it's like it follows. It's going to have like a little seed in my brain, like where I have like, it has staying power with me. Like
that first scene, she's like, look.
That first scene is insane. It's so chilly.
Like, what? I'm like,
well, also showing like part of the face in that first scene, and it's like they're not really hiding it, but they're not really showing it. I love that.
Yes. It's so good. It's such a good opening. And I don't like what he said about Maxine, but I do know what he was getting at. It's just like this like murder thriller.
I think he picked Maxine out of a hat when he said that. I think he meant like, I'm not watching horror movies, and then he picked whatever the most horror movie he could think of at that moment. You know what I mean? I really don't think
there was like a billboard in LA. He's like the Maxine.
There's no way that he thinks that's the worst example of a horror movie that he wouldn't watch. I feel like that's one of those quotes that, I mean, even I kind of bristled at it, but I think it's a quote. People, you know what I mean? That's every story you read now is somebody taking a quote outside of the framing that made it make sense. Yeah. And I also think he was trying to be provocative. And, I'd say let's go back to interviews where people say stuff that trashes their competitors, people that are out around the same time as them. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that up to a point that's healthy. That's healthy, but I do think like he could have picked a more deserving target if he's going to say, like, he didn't say because of movies like Maxine, I'm not watching horror movies. Yeah. He was saying I don't watch other horror movies because I don't want it to infect my process. That's how I took what he was saying. Like he doesn't want to think of what he's doing.
Interpretation was so much nicer than the red.
Well, I mean, he basically is saying that it's not a genre that he watches just because it's a genre that he makes, and there's a lot of ways to go with that idea. And I think that's fine to say, I don't need to know what everyone else is doing in this genre, to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Did you just mute yourself, Ronald?
Yes, I coughed and I didn't want it to get on air.
Okay.
I kind of wish you would have.
You didn't want to spread it through the audio waves.
Not at all.
That's very sweet of you.
It is airborne and air. Nothing. I don't know what I was trying to say.
It's fine. We can cut that
Has
out.
there been a movie about that? About people catching shit through Wi-Fi? I'm sure that.
Well, that was the whole conspiracy about COVID. It was like 5G is. There were like people that really thought that like.
Let's not acknowledge that.
Okay. I'm just saying it's like a real. It's like a real thing.
I believe you. I know you're right. You're absolutely correct.
Oh God.
That's where we're at. What was the other one we were going to... Oh, John, you saw Strange Darling also.
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's like an elevated horror movie that delivers. It's strange, guys. Darling. My mom would use darling like in an adjectival sense. Like she would say that something was darling. Oh, that's just darling. Okay. You look so darling. So yeah, this movie is strange and darling. But I would say it's more strange and daring. Ooh, look at that. Take one letter out. Ruin a word by taking one letter out. No, this is a really cool movie, I think. Like it's nonlinear. It wears that on its sleeve. It starts off and says 6 chapters, and then it shows you chapters in, like, starts with chapter 3, I think, and then goes through and changes the order. So you don't see it in the order of the chronology of the story, and that would be like, oh God, sure, yeah, great, thank you for doing that, guys, real clever, Except that the way that plays certain details, it keeps it interesting. Like each time it cuts, it's not like you're waiting a long time. It's only about an hour and 40 minutes, I think. And it's got a cool slow motion opening scene. It's just conceptually interesting. The performances are, I guess I would say, just fantastic. Willa Fitzgerald as the lady and Kyle Gallner as the demon are like amazing. And it just like what they do in terms of the shifting tone of what's happening between them and what's really going on, and when you think you know what's really going on, they throw a detail at you that makes you realize, oh, maybe I don't know so much, and then they do that again, and then maybe again, and it's how many times have you seen that, where they effectively keep you guessing? Here's an example of this movie really winning with me, is that you guys know I like to enjoy an icy at the movie. Well, this time I went to White Marsh, where they have flavors you don't have at other places, and they've had green apple there before. They've also had watermelon there before, and so I saw they had something called like crazy apple or twisted apple or something, and I just filled my thing up with that, and then got in there and sat down, and it was like caramel apple. It was trying to be caramel apple flavored icy, and it was terrible. And I had a giant thing sitting right there, and the movie had just started. And the icy machine is like right around the corner from the showroom that I was in, and there wasn't really anybody there at the theater. So I could have easily run, gotten a fresh icy, dumped this out, and gotten a fresh one of a flavor that was tolerable, and then gotten back in there. And I was like, well, this movie's kind of slow and interesting, but I bet it'll hit a point, and I will find a moment to go dump this out, get a fresh icy, and run back in.
Right.
And I never did. I was like, right up until the last like 20 minutes of the movie, I was like, I never found a time that I wasn't like super interested to know what was going to happen next. And I don't just mean like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen, but like, well, I can't miss this scene. Well, I can't miss this. Well, no, I can't walk out during this. Well, I can't leave now. And so I just sat there with that disgusting icy, and by the time I came out, they had turned off the machine, so I couldn't even like sneak a little icy for the ride home. But at any rate, it was that kind of movie where there was no way I was going to not see the implication of what had just happened. And so often it's like dialogue that takes a turn, but then often things are happening. And there were some parts where I was full on disturbed, thinking, oh, I don't really like this movie. This is the kind of movie where they're showing you every moment and like something awful happening to somebody. And then it would take a turn and turn away from the thing you're kind of hoping they don't show you, but not before giving you that real glimpse of something disturbing. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like it was perfect or anything, but right down to the sort of bit characters that come in and out. Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey are in it for a scene or two.
Oh, nice.
They're really interesting. The way it was filmed was really interesting. I did not know the cinematographer was Giovanni Ribisi until the movie was over and I saw his name in the credits. But I was thinking the whole time, this movie is amazingly shot. Like, oh wow, this is really like the cinematography is one of the things that would impress you about it.
Wow.
And I would only say right in the last 10 minutes or so does it feel like it's really going, this is really good, isn't it? I think maybe the last, there's a moment that could be trimmed by about half of its runtime and the movie would have retained its power. But that's a small criticism of a movie that I thought was really interesting and again, very disturbing, and you'll be watching it and at points thinking like, this is almost offensive. It'll steer away soon enough and into something more interesting. And then you realize what you are watching. And I don't want to say any more about, I mean, you can read the description. The description doesn't really tell you too much, but I would say even beyond that, I would not want to even, I don't even think the description is that accurate. I would just say it's like a series of vignettes between these two characters, and each scene changes the dynamic between them.
Okay. I like it. I can't wait to see it.
If you like Kyle Gallner and you've always thought he's good, he's next level. He's next level in this. It is a fantastic performance, and I've never seen Willa Fitzgerald before, and therefore I feel like I had no beat on who this character is or what her energy is or anything. And yeah, the actress and the character as written kept me guessing the whole time. So
that's awesome, man. I dig it. Can't wait to see it. It's weird, like when we were talking about it on our thread, like I was trying to go see it like that night, and Owings Mills and Security, who are the closest two to me, don't have it anymore. it's White Marsh or Columbia.
Yeah, and White Marsh only has a 10 p.m.
Yeah, I was gonna say one's
screening.
at 10 and one's at 10:10. I was like, God damn, I can't get there.
It's the 10 o'clock screening. That's the one where they turn off the icy machine.
Yeah, man. They're waiting for you to leave after that movie.
Get the hell out.
Say, oh my God, I can't believe someone took some of that caramel apple flavored icing.
Very cool. All right, man. Well, that sounds like a must see to me. I can't wait to see it. Anything else you guys want to mention having seen in the last week or so?
I'll just say quickly, the first couple episodes of Only Murders in the Building have been super fun.
Agreed.
And in keeping with that show. And I took your suggestion, Steve, and Nikki and I are now 2 episodes into Bad Monkey. And
cool.
I have turned to her probably 3 times and said, this is a good use of Vince Vaughn.
Oh, absolutely.
It is, man.
I think the hair dye is a little too much. I don't think they need to go that hard into like trying to age him down. And I hope Alex Moffat's character becomes less one note as the story goes along, just because he seems kind of like a different tone compared to the others. But I don't know. I'm fully in the tank of just for this tone. I like the laid back pace of it.
Yeah, it's good so far. I can't wait to watch more of it. I felt like there was one that I did watch that I wanted to. I wanted to recommend a movie called Thelma with June Squibb.
I want to see that.
It's great. It's absolutely great. Like
see that.
It's so good. Yeah. I tried to catch that in theaters, didn't get out to see it, but finally caught it on demand. Yeah, I loved it. It was so good. Yeah, highly recommend that one. And then there was one more. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a watch list here. I wanted to mention the one Fresh Kills, which is I was texting you guys, Jennifer Esposito's directorial debut. It's on demand right now.
Your friend, your close personal friend, Jennifer Esposito.
Yeah, I'm legit trying to. I'm going to try to get her on this podcast. She's going to come on this podcast, I think.
It'd be amazing.
Yeah, like one of the critics, press members I follow on Twitter, she's been like raving about this movie. I think it was at Tribeca, or no, she didn't see it at Tribeca or the New York Film Festival where it played, and she ended up getting an opportunity to see it and like was just raving about it. And it's not that level of a movie, but I mean, for being a smaller indie film that apparently, Jennifer Esposito at least co-wrote and directed, stars in it. But it's mostly a younger cast that are the stars of this movie. It's just like a multi-generational, mob family drama, thriller. Think, something along the lines of, Goodfellas or Sopranos in that world, and more about the kids of those families and the choices that they get to make or really have no decision in making. But it just completely shocked me how much I liked it. Like I was just, I want to watch this because I've heard good things and I like kind of crime mob dramas. And it was very good. That also is on demand, if that sounds like something up your alley. But yeah, those were the 2 that I wanted to mention just because you can go rent them for like $3 or $4 and watch them now if you like.
I just wanted to mention one movie, Sean Wang's Didi. It is a great coming of age movie. He did this short on Disney Plus called, I think it's called Wei Wei and Waipo, about a grandma and granddad that get along but don't get along. And it's this cool coming of age about this guy named Chris, who's known as Didi and his family. And it's like the MySpace era, early YouTube. And it's just the pressures of social interactions and looking on somebody's page after you got into an argument with them and seeing if you were in the top 8. And, it's like that stuff. Right. Man, that stuff was so close to home. And then YouTube, what YouTube represented, just kind of how it hit everybody like a ton of bricks. So you could go from no place to really put anything to this infinite space to put your content. And in the early days, what people were doing, like essentially just skate videos is what I remember. And he becomes like a low-tech editor and makes friends that way. So it's a cool movie, man. Really, really cool. The lead is that plays Didi is so funny. Yeah, Didi.
Cool. All right, I think that's it. Moviesmovie.com is the website. You can go there to subscribe to the podcast in audio form on any of the podcast platforms that are basically out there, whichever one's your favorite, or you can listen right on the site. You can also go to youtube.com/Movie Schmovie Podcast if you want the visual element that I referred to at the top of the show. If you do that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you get notified when new episodes come out there as well. We'll be back for a new episode shortly. And again, as a reminder, John's pick for the next required viewing is Fierce Creatures, which should be pretty available, I guess. We didn't actually discuss that, but let's assume that you can find that movie hopefully somewhere.
I'm looking. It is available. It's in that $3.99, $4.99 rental space on Google Play, YouTube, Apple, Fandango, and Amazon Prime. So yeah, it's out there.
Very cool. So that'll be in the next episode. And until then, thank you for listening. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.